Two operators enter the same room. Same target, same threat, different units, different countries, different doctrines built across different decades. One of them makes a decision in the next 4 seconds that the other does not make. And the gap between those two decisions, not the equipment, not the physical condition, not the years of training, is the gap that decides everything. The question of what truly separates elite units when everything else is equal is one of the most argued questions in military science. Generals debate it. Analysts publish papers about it. Operators who worked alongside other nations best quietly form their own views, which they almost never share in public. This video is the attempt to answer it properly, not by ranking, not by declaring a winner, but by looking at what the evidence, the exercises, and the data actually say about 5 of the world's most capable special operations forces, and what happens when equal forces meet and one of them comes out ahead. The answer is not what most people expect. The comparison of elite military units is one of the most popular and most poorly conducted exercises in defense journalism. The rankings that appear in magazines and online forums share a common flaw. They compare things that can be measured against things that cannot, weight the measurable things too heavily, and then present the result as if it were a conclusion rather than a preference. Physical fitness standards can be measured. Weapons proficiency can be tested. Response times and standardized scenarios can be clocked. What cannot be easily measured is the quality of decision-making under conditions that are genuinely novel, situations that no training scenario has specifically prepared an operator for, where the right answer is not in the manual, because the manual was written for situations that have categories and this one does not. The 5 units examined here are the United States 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, known as Delta Force, the British 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, Poland's Jednostka Wojskowa GROM, Israel's Sayeret Matkal, and Norway's Forsvaret Spesialkommando. Each of these units is, by any objective assessment, among the finest military formations in the world. Each selects from the best available candidates in their respective nations. Each trains to a standard that most military personnel cannot approach. Before we go further, if the kind of analysis that does not reduce complex questions to simple rankings is what you come here for, subscribe to Deep Insight now and turn on notifications. Every week there is another story. Now back to the question that nobody who has actually served alongside multiple elite units will answer simply. What separates them when the equipment is comparable and the people are all exceptional? The answer starts earlier than most people think. Every elite unit begins with selection. The process of identifying which candidates from an already high-performing pool possess the specific qualities a unit needs. Selection is where the comparison starts, and where the first real differences emerge. Delta Force selection runs approximately 4 weeks of assessed physical events followed by a land navigation phase that is designed specifically to produce decision fatigue. The pass rate varies by cycle, but historically sits between 5 and 15% of those who begin. The physical standards are extremely high. The assessment of judgment under prolonged stress is the element that removes candidates who would otherwise pass on physical merit alone. The SAS selection process, known simply as selection, runs approximately 6 months and includes an endurance phase in the Brecon Beacons of Wales that has become one of the most recognizable military selection events in the world. The pass rate is similarly low. What distinguishes SAS selection is its emphasis on navigation and self-sufficiency, the ability to operate independently across difficult terrain for extended periods without support. GROM selection, by the accounts of those who have studied it externally, runs an attrition rate of approximately 80%. Israeli Sayeret Matkal selection is built around a process called Gibush, an initial assessment weekend that filters the initial pool with extreme severity before the longer selection course begins. Norwegian FSK selection integrates winter warfare survivability from an early stage, reflecting the environment in which the unit expects to operate. What all 5 processes have in common is not what they test. It is what they are looking for underneath the test. Once selected, each unit trains according to a philosophy that reflects both its national military culture and the specific operational role it has been built to fill. These philosophies are genuinely different. They produce genuinely different strengths. Delta Force operates within the United States Special Operations Framework, the most resource-intensive military training environment in the world. Access to ranges, aircraft, simulators, and training facilities is, by global standards, extraordinary. The volume of training is very high. The emphasis on integrated team movement, rehearse until team functions as a single organism, reflect a doctrine built on the assumption that technology and resources will be available and that the team will be complete. The SAS training philosophy places a disproportionate emphasis on individual capability. An SAS operator is expected to be able to function effectively even when isolated from his unit, to navigate, survive, communicate, and execute without the support structure that other units rely on. This is not a weakness in Delta's philosophy or a strength to be ranked. It is a different set of choices about what the unit might be asked to do. GROM's philosophy, built on SAS principles but developed independently through Polish military culture, places significant emphasis on psychological resilience, the specific quality that allows an operator to maintain tactical clarity when the situation has become chaotic rather than merely difficult. Sayeret Matkal's philosophy reflects decades of operating in an environment where intelligence is degraded and the situation on the ground regularly contradicts the briefing. Norwegian FSK philosophy integrates environmental hardship at a level that other units rarely sustain in peacetime training. What the five philosophies produce, when they meet in a joint exercise, is an outcome that surprises almost everyone the first time they see it. The physical question is the one most people ask first. It is also the one with the least operational significance at the level of these units. All five units train their operators to a physical standard that, by the general population's measure, would be considered extreme. A Delta operator, an SAS sergeant, a GROM operator, and a Norwegian FSK soldier placed on the same fitness assessment will produce results that were, for all meaningful purposes, equivalent. The differences that exist between them are smaller than the differences within any single unit between its highest and lowest performers. What matters at this level is not peak physical capacity. It is the rate of physical degradation under sustained operational stress. A unit whose operators reach their physical limit faster, regardless of how high that limit is, loses a meaningful edge in operations that extend beyond 24 hours. The research on this specific question, degradation rate under sustained stress, consistently points to the same finding. The determining variable is not the physical training program. It is the psychological relationship an operator has with physical discomfort. An operator who experiences physical pain as information, a signal to be assessed and managed, degrades more slowly than one who experiences it as a signal to stop, regardless of the absolute physical ceiling of either. Norwegian FSK operators, trained in an environment that makes physical suffering routine rather than exceptional, consistently demonstrate the lowest degradation rates in joint exercise assessments. British SAS operators, shaped by a selection process that specifically targets the capacity to endure for longer than rational calculation says is possible, show similar profiles. At the highest level of elite units, physical fitness is table stakes. Degradation rate is the differentiator, and you have 48 hours to see the gap open. The marksmanship comparison between elite units is more nuanced than the headline suggests and more important than the physical comparison in a specific operational context. All five units train marksmanship to a standard that is, by any external measure, very high. But the comparison that matters is not accuracy on a static range at a known distance with a prepared position. It is accuracy in a dynamic environment where the shooter is moving, the target is not predictable, the light is poor, and the physical exertion of the preceding hours has degraded fine motor control. Under these conditions, the conditions that actually describe most real-world special operations engagements, the differences between units become visible. The unit that shoots best in this environment is not necessarily the one with the highest scores on a structured range assessment. Israeli Sayeret Matkal's marksmanship tradition is built almost entirely around the latter scenario. Their training rarely replicates controlled range conditions because controlled range conditions rarely replicate their operational environment. The result is a marksmanship standard that is, in the specific scenario of a dynamic, degraded, close-quarters engagement, measurably superior to units that train primarily on structured range progressions. GROM's marksmanship training, documented in limited external assessments, shows a similar emphasis on the European precision tradition, a methodology that produces exceptional accuracy through mental discipline rather than volume of rounds. The specific comparison between these two approaches, observed in a joint training exercise in the early 2000s, produced a result that both units' observers found difficult to account for within their existing frameworks. The result was not a score. It was a question that changed how one of those units trains to this day. If physical fitness is table stakes and marksmanship is a nuanced advantage in specific scenarios, decision-making under genuine uncertainty is the variable that most consistently predicts outcome when equal forces meet. The research on military decision-making under stress produces a consistent finding that is counterintuitive to most people outside the special operations community. The operators who make the best decisions in genuinely novel situations are not the ones with the most training hours, the most scenario rehearsals, or the most structured analytical frameworks. They are the ones with the highest tolerance for the specific discomfort of not knowing. Most military training is, by necessity, conducted in scenarios that have categories. The operator is taught to identify which category the situation belongs to and apply the appropriate response. This is efficient and produces good results in situations that have been anticipated. It produces poor results in situations that have not. The unit whose operators can suspend the search for the category, who can hold the discomfort of genuine uncertainty long enough for the actual situation to reveal itself, makes better decisions at the margin than the unit whose operators default to the nearest available category, even when that category is a poor fit. Delta Force's emphasis on rehearsal and team integration is explicitly a hedge against this problem. By training the team's response to exhaustion, the unit reduces a dependence on individual decision-making in the moments of highest stress. The SAS individual capability philosophy is the opposite hedge. By training the individual to function without the team, the unit ensures that decision quality does not collapse when the team structure is degraded. Neither hedge is wrong. Both have costs. What the data says about which cost is higher is something that only emerges when you put both approaches under controlled comparison, and the result of those comparisons are among the most carefully guarded assessments in NATO's planning files. Joint exercises between special operations units from different nations happen more frequently than the public record reflects. NATO's special operations architecture creates regular opportunity for allied units to train alongside each other, and the informal assessments that emerge from those exercises, never published, rarely discussed outside the units involved, form the most accurate comparative picture available. The exercise described here is a composite drawn from documented accounts, operational research, and the assessment of analysts who have studied joint training outcomes. It is not a single event. It is a representation of what consistently emerges when these specific units operate in the same environment against the same problem. The scenario, a complex hostage rescue requiring simultaneous breach at multiple locations, degraded communications, a simulated explosive threat at the primary target, and a time window calibrated to be achievable but not comfortable. Both units have access to the same intelligence. Both have the same preparation time. The equipment differential, where it exists, has been controlled for. The assessment covers 3 categories: execution speed, casualty rate among simulated hostages, and operator decision quality during the deliberate complication introduced at the 4-minute mark. In categories 1 and 2, speed and hostage outcomes, the results across repeated iterations of the scenario cluster tightly. No unit consistently outperforms the others at a statistically significant level. The gap between the best and worst performance in both categories is within the margin of variation within a single unit across iterations. Category 3, decision quality at the 4-minute complication, tells a different story. And what that story says about which quality actually predicts outcome is what changed the way 2 of these units trained their operators in the years that followed. The technology question is the most common objection raised when elite unit comparisons move toward conclusions that do not favor the most resource units. Delta Force operates with access to equipment that most Allied special operations units do not have. Night vision technology, communication systems, surveillance assets, and integrated command and control capabilities give a Delta element in the field of situational awareness picture that is genuinely superior to what a GROM or FSK element can construct from available resources. This matters. It is not a trivial advantage, and it should not be minimized. A unit that knows more about the environment it is operating and makes fewer unexpected errors. The technology advantage is real, and it translates into measurable outcomes in specific scenarios. But the technology advantage has a threshold beyond which additional investment produces diminishing returns, and a ceiling below which the technology becomes a liability rather than an asset. An operator who relies on a communication system that fails behaves differently from an operator who expects communications to be degraded and has trained accordingly. An operator whose situational awareness depends on a surveillance feed that is cut behaves differently from an operator whose situational awareness is built from direct observation and inference. The research on technology dependency in special operations is still developing, but a consistent finding from joint exercises where technology conditions are equalized, where both units are given the same access and the same limitations, is that the gap between units does not close. It remains, and the variable that predicts its direction is not the equipment. The SAS sergeant who grew up in a doctrine that expected technology to fail makes a better decision when the screen goes dark than the operator whose doctrine assumed it would not. The most honest summary of the available data on comparative elite unit performance is this: no unit is consistently superior across all assessed categories, and a unit that performs best in any specific scenario is almost always a unit whose training philosophy most closely matches the demands of that scenario. This is not a non-answer. It is the answer, and it has a specific implication. The question of what truly decides victory between equal forces is not answered by looking at the units. It is answered by looking at the scenario. A hostage rescue in an urban environment with good intelligence and a tight time window favors a unit trained on coordinated team breach and rapid clearance. A long-range surveillance mission in high-altitude winter terrain favors a unit trained on individual navigation and environmental endurance. A direct action mission against a target with degraded intelligence and a complication that emerges mid-execution favors a unit trained on decision quality under genuine uncertainty. The data from joint exercises, training assessments, and the limited operational records that are available publicly or through research access consistently shows that the scenario unit match is a stronger predictor of outcome than any intrinsic quality of the unit itself. This finding has been absorbed differently by different militaries. The United States Special Operations community has responded by expanding the range of scenarios that Delta is trained against, increasing the deliberate uncertainty in exercise designs. The British response has been less structural and more philosophical, an ongoing institutional conversation about whether the SAS individual emphasis should be adjusted toward the team integration that the data suggests produces better outcomes in certain high-value scenarios. You have approximately 2 minutes before this question becomes a verdict. Beneath all the training, the technology, the doctrine, and the data, there's a variable that none of the assessments can fully capture because it does not appear consistently enough to be measured reliably. It is a variable that operators, when they are speaking privately rather than institutionally, return to most often when explaining why a specific mission went one way rather than another. Call it composure. Call it presence. Call it the ability to be in the situation rather than above it or ahead of it. The operator who is fully in the present moment of the engagement, not calculating the next step, not managing the anxiety of the unknown, but genuinely present in the specific second they are in, makes better decisions than the operator of equivalent capability who is not. This quality is not the same as experience, though experience can produce it. It is not the same as training volume, though training under genuine stress can develop it. It is not the same as physical calm, though physical calm can enable it. It is a specific psychological state that allows a person to process the actual situation rather than the anticipated situation, and to act on what is actually happening rather than on what was planned for. When asked to identify the quality that distinguished the operators they had worked alongside from other exceptional operators, the most consistent answer given by senior figures from all 5 units was a version of the same thing. Not speed, not strength, not marksmanship, the ability to be wrong about the plan and right about the moment. That quality is not selected for directly by any of the 5 units. It emerges from the process. So what truly decides victory between equal forces? The honest answer, supported by the available evidence, is that no single quality consistently predicts the outcome when 2 genuinely elite units face the same problem. The scenario determines which unit-specific strengths are most relevant. The technology equalization determines whether resource advantages survive contact with conditions. The individual human variable, the specific quality of presence under uncertainty, introduces a component that no training program has fully learned to produce on demand. But if one factor is forced to the top, one quality that appears most consistently in the unit that performs better when the scenarios have been controlled, the technology equalized, and the physical condition matched, it is not the one that headlines focus on. It is the capacity to update, the ability to receive information that contradicts the plan, and to act on the contradiction rather than the plan. The specific quality that allows a unit to treat the unexpected as data rather than as a threat to the framework. Delta Force's rehearsal culture builds extraordinary team performance within the expected scenario. The SAS individual emphasis builds extraordinary individual performance outside it. GROM psychological resilience emphasis builds extraordinary maintenance of tactical clarity when the situation has deteriorated. Sayeret Matkal's operational environment has built an almost reflexive capacity to update in the face of contradicting information. Norwegian FSK's environmental training has built a relationship with discomfort that keeps the decision-making clean when everything else is difficult. The unit that wins when equal forces meet is the one that learns fastest on the day. The question that nobody in any of those units will answer with certainty is whether that quality can be trained or whether it has to be found. 5 units, 1 question, and an answer that is genuinely more interesting than any ranking could produce. The real comparison between elite forces is not a competition. It is a conversation about what excellence requires under different conditions, and what the units that produce it have chosen priorities when they cannot have everything. Every choice that makes a unit exceptional in one scenario makes it slightly less exceptional in another. The units at the top of this comparison are the ones that have chosen most clearly and trained most honestly to what they have chosen. Deep insight cover comparisons like this one, the ones that deserve more than a ranked list and less than a classified document. If this one gave you something to think about, subscribe so you are there for the next one. Hit like so more people find this analysis. And leave a comment with your answer to this. If you had to choose one quality above all others to train into an elite unit, what would it be and why? We read every response. The debate below this video is part of the analysis.